Hi guys, sorry to interrupt your viewing, but please subscribe to the channel and like this video. Thank you.
My brother walked into my promotion party 45 minutes late, already tipsy and sweating through his expensive button down like he'd jogged there. He smelled like top shelf whiskey and entitlement, and the second I saw him, I knew he was going to ruin it. Still, I smiled and handed him a plate. I'd spent the past month planning this night, handpicked the wine, catered my favorite Italian dishes, even borrowed the neighbor's string lights for ambience. The people in that room weren't just coworkers or acquaintances. They were the rare kind of friends who'd seen me claw my way through unpaid internships, 40-hour weeks paired with night school, and more than one bottle of wine cried into alone on a Sunday night. I was 32 and had just made partner at the architecture firm I'd been at for 7 years. It was a big deal, at least to me, but to Ryan, it was just another excuse to make everything about him. He didn't even say hello before he poured himself a drink and announced, "Hope y'all are ready for one hell of a speech. My baby sister here finally did something that doesn't make us all cringe." A few people laughed, mostly out of awkward politeness, but I felt it, the subtle change in the room, like someone had dimmed the lights. I tried to wave it off with a joke. "He's joking," I said. "He's just upset I finally outrank him in something besides credit score." That got a better laugh, but Ryan's smile twisted. Mom was already 3 glasses in, buzzing around nervously, telling people stories they didn't ask for, her eyes darting between us like she knew something was coming, and maybe she did. She'd always tried to keep the peace, which in our house meant pretending Ryan's screw-ups were charming and my achievements were either overkill or expected. He could crash a car and be called misunderstood. I could win a grant and be told not to brag. So when he raised his glass again and called for everyone's attention, I felt my stomach sink like a stone. "Let's all raise a glass to Hannah," he said, drawing out my name like it tasted bitter, "for finally making partner. She's got the title, the corner office, and the resume to die for. Just goes to show, if you work hard, follow the rules, and have absolutely no social life, you too can become the most boring person at your own party." A few chuckles, a few silent stares. I kept smiling, barely. Then he added, "But let's not forget. She's always been the smart one, right? That's what Mom and Dad say, or at least that's what they say to her. We all know they're just being polite. I mean, come on, let's not pretend here. Hannah's success is like watching a turtle cross a freeway. Sure, it gets to the other side eventually. But do you really want to clap for that?" The room froze. Someone dropped a fork. My boss, who flew in from Chicago, whispered something to his wife and looked away. My old roommate, who once sat up with me all night after I failed my first design pitch, looked like she wanted to throw her drink in his face. But nobody said anything, not even my parents. Ryan went on because, of course, he did. "You know what? Screw it. Let's just say it. You'll never be as smart as me, Hannah. You never were. They just pretended to be proud of you so you wouldn't fall apart. You think this promotion means you're finally equal? Please. This family's been carrying you since day one, and that was it." I felt the rage coil up in me. Not hot and fast, but slow, deep, and cold. Like something ancient waking up. But I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I reached into my purse and pulled out the envelope I'd been carrying for over a month. It was thick, ivory-colored, with an embossed logo on the front. Columbia Business School, fully funded, full ride, early acceptance into their executive MBA program. I had been waiting for the right moment to share it. Thought I might tell my parents after dinner. Thought I might toast to it quietly before dessert. But now it was my sword. I held it up. The room, already silent, seemed to inhale all at once. "That's interesting, Ryan," I said. "Really, but see, I've been holding on to this for a while. Thought I'd wait until everyone quieted down before sharing it." I opened the flap slowly, dramatically, like peeling back the last layer of patience I had left. "This is a scholarship, Ivy League. I leave in 3 months. They picked 6 people out of over 800 applicants. And I didn't tell anyone because I wanted it to be mine, not something you turned into another punchline." Mom started clapping, her hands tipsy and unsure, made soft slaps against each other like a child's. "Oh, honey, that's—" I cut her off. "No need," I said, turning to her, then Dad, then Ryan. "You'll never see a cent of it. Not for flights, not for tuition help, not for holidays. I'm done giving this family reasons to pretend they care. I'm taking this, and I'm leaving, and I'm not coming back." Ryan's drink slipped from his hand and shattered on the tile. He looked at me like I'd slapped him, and maybe, in a way, I had. Because for once in his life, he wasn't the only one holding the mic. And I wasn't done, not even close. There was a split second after Ryan's glass shattered where time seemed to hesitate, like the whole room had forgotten how to breathe. The echo of that glass, real crystal, probably something he'd borrowed from our parents' cabinet without asking, rang through the house louder than any of his insults ever had. I didn't move. I didn't blink. I just held the envelope in front of me, steady, like it weighed nothing at all, even though it held the truth that could crush everything they believed about me. I had waited for this moment, rehearsed it in my head 100 times, and somehow it still felt surreal. The look on Ryan's face was a strange mix of confusion, betrayal, and something close to fear, like for the first time he realized I wasn't the one who'd end up apologizing. The guests didn't know what to do. Some of them were just work friends, caught in the middle of a family storm they never signed up for. A few avoided eye contact altogether, whispering behind glasses of Cabernet. But I saw a few faces light up, not with joy exactly, but with something sharper, something like recognition. Maybe they'd been the Hannah in their own families, the one who was expected to keep things calm while someone else lit everything on fire. I kept my voice level, calm, almost too calm. "This envelope," I said, holding it a little higher, "contains my full scholarship offer to Columbia Business School, Executive MBA program, one of the most competitive in the country. They pick 6 people a year for this level of funding. I didn't just get in, I was the top candidate." I didn't look at Ryan when I said it. I looked at my parents. Dad had the decency to look stunned. His mouth hung slightly open, his drink untouched on the coffee table beside him. Mom's eyes were already wet. She had the kind of expression people wear when they think they're supposed to cry but don't really know why. Like the tears weren't for me or even for what had just happened, but for the way the narrative she'd clung to all these years was crumbling in real time. It was like she could see the story she always told, the one where Ryan was the brilliant one, and I was the careful planner, unraveling right in front of her, thread by thread. "I didn't tell anyone, Maud," I continued, "because I wanted it to be mine, all of it, not something you could criticize or undermine or turn into a joke, not something to be absorbed into Ryan's never-ending drama." I turned then slowly to face my brother. "You think I'm the boring one? Fine, maybe I am, maybe I had to be. You burned everything you touched. Cars, jobs, money, people, and somehow they all still called you gifted. I followed every rule, I paid every bill, I sat through every screaming match and covered every mess, and no one ever clapped for me unless you were too drunk to notice." Ryan looked like he wanted to say something, but his mouth just opened and closed. I could see his mind trying to climb out of the hole he'd just dug, but he had no ladder this time, no parent ready to offer him a hand, no girlfriend to twist it into sympathy, just silence. Mom stepped forward, her voice too soft and too late. "Hannah, honey, we didn't know you were applying to graduate school. You never said—" "That's the point," I cut in. "Because you wouldn't have cared. You would have smiled and said something like, 'That's nice, dear,' and then spent the next hour talking about how Ryan's latest idea was finally going to pay off. Again." My voice didn't rise, but the edge in it was unmistakable. "You think I didn't hear you that day on the phone, Mom? When you told Aunt Diane, 'We worry about Ryan more because Hannah will always land on her feet.' You thought that was a compliment. It wasn't. It was an excuse. You gave him the freedom to fail and gave me the responsibility of being fine, no matter what." My father shifted in his seat. "That's not fair," he said, the first words out of his mouth since the disaster began. "We supported both of you the best we could." I turned to him slowly. "No, Dad, You funded Ryan's ideas, bailed him out of credit card debt, even co-signed a lease after he'd been evicted. You let him come home at 35 with no job and live rent-free. You call that support. You know what I got? A lecture about choosing a practical major and a used Camry with a failing transmission. Don't stand there and rewrite history just because you're embarrassed now. Someone near the back cleared their throat, probably wishing the earth would swallow them whole. I didn't blame them. Watching someone finally set a match to a family's polite lies isn't entertainment. It's surgery without anesthesia. Then I did the thing I knew would change everything. I walked over to the coffee table, placed the envelope down in the center, and stood tall. There's a line in that letter that says, "I can defer the offer up to 12 months. I won't be deferring. I've already accepted. I'm moving in August, and I won't be inviting anyone to the send-off." My mother gasped, like I'd just told her someone died. My father stared at the envelope like it might explode. Ryan finally spoke. "You're going to throw this family away over a scholarship?" That was when I laughed. Not because it was funny, but because it was so absurd I couldn't hold it in. "No, Ryan, you threw this family away a long time ago. I'm just the one finally walking away from the fire." I didn't cry, I didn't break. I let them sit in it, the silence, the shame, the truth, and for once I didn't rush to fix the awkwardness. I let the weight of my words hang in the air like smoke from a long smothered fire finally reignited. And I hadn't even told them the worst part yet. It's strange the way memory works under pressure. While my family sat stunned in my living room, eyes darting, breath shallow, their illusion of balance cracking like thin ice underfoot, I found my mind retreating almost involuntarily to the moments that brought us to this place. Not the loud ones, not the obvious disasters like Ryan's outbursts or my parents' enabling nods, but the quieter humiliations, the ones that compound slowly until you stop noticing how heavy they've become. Those were the ones that stayed with me, not because they were dramatic, but because they were so damn ordinary. I remember being 17 and opening the mailbox one cold February morning, my fingers frozen, the metal handle stiff with ice. Inside was a thick envelope from Stanford, one of those big glossy folders that told you right away it wasn't a rejection. I'd worked harder than I ever had for that acceptance, taken extra AP classes, spent weekends volunteering, cried over calculus more than I care to admit. I walked inside holding that envelope like it was made of gold. I handed it to Mom, glowing. She smiled, opened it, skimmed the first few lines, and then said the most deflating sentence of my teenage life. "That's wonderful, sweetie, but you know Ryan's trying to get his music production certificate too. Maybe you two can both end up in California." That was the first time it hit me that my successes would always be resized to make room for his failures. Ryan had dropped out of college 2 semesters in. No explanation, no point, just stopped showing up. He bounced around half-finished ideas and projects, as he called them, which ranged from a podcast about the death of masculinity to a line of hoodies with Bible verses screen-printed in Gothic font. My parents funded most of them. When they didn't, he guilted girlfriends into doing it. Whenever it all collapsed, which it always did, he came back to the house, sat on the couch, and sulked until Mom made him meatloaf and Dad handed him a pep talk about taking time to find your path. Meanwhile, I was balancing a full course load and a part-time job, living off boxed mac and cheese and wondering how anyone could keep loving a man who refused to grow up. Another memory floated up, uninvited. I was 22, still in grad school, when I got the chance to present a paper at a regional architecture symposium. It was a big deal. Professionals from major firms would be there, the kind of people who could open doors with one recommendation. I called home the night before, nervous and excited, hoping to hear something encouraging. Mom answered. I told her everything, down to the time slot I'd been given, the nerves I was trying to keep in check, the shoes I was breaking in because I couldn't afford new ones. There was a pause on the line. Then she said, "That's great, honey. I wish we could come, but Ryan has that court hearing on Wednesday, and we don't want to leave him alone." That hearing was for a bar fight he didn't even remember. By the time I came back to the present moment in my living room, the silence had deepened into something almost hostile. Ryan sat hunched on the edge of the couch like a teenager caught stealing. My father leaned back, staring at the ceiling as if divine intervention might descend and explain how his perfectly controlled family had turned into a battlefield. Mom was crying, softly, not out of guilt. I knew her better than that. But out of embarrassment, like she couldn't believe the world outside her front door had been invited into this mess. But I didn't feel bad. I didn't feel like I was betraying anyone. What I felt was relief, pure, undiluted relief. For the first time in my life, I wasn't pretending. I wasn't playing the role of the steady daughter, the good listener, the quiet fixer. I was speaking my mind and letting the chips fall wherever they wanted, even if they landed in jagged, painful places. Ryan finally lifted his head, his voice thick with something between resentment and self-pity. "So what now, Hannah? You're gonna move across the country and just forget we exist? Is that what this is about? You punishing us for not clapping loud enough?" I tilted my head slightly, not out of confusion but calculation. It's not about forgetting you exist. It's about remembering that I do. He blinked, visibly thrown off by the answer. For years, I'd been the one to bend, to soften, to smooth the rough edges of every confrontation so he could feel like the better man. That version of me, the soft-spoken peacemaker, was dead now. What stood in her place was a woman who had learned, over 30 years of small slights and swallowed anger, that silence only serves the loudest voice in the room. And I was done being quiet. Dad cleared his throat, probably trying to salvage what little dignity he could. "Look, sweetheart, I get that we've made mistakes. But this, airing everything out in front of guests, it's not fair. It's not how families solve problems." That might have worked on me 10 years ago. Not now. "You're right," I said. "It's not how families solve problems. But then again, we've never solved anything, have we? We've just buried it. And now the bodies are starting to stink." A few guests awkwardly excused themselves, grabbing coats and wine glasses and avoiding eye contact like they were sneaking out of a funeral for someone they never really liked. I didn't blame them. I wasn't performing for them anyway. This wasn't for the crowd. It was for me. I walked to the kitchen slowly, not with drama, but with purpose. Poured myself a glass of water. My hands didn't shake. I thought they might, but they didn't. I turned around and leaned against the counter, facing my family like a jury I'd finally decided not to placate. "I'm not angry that you favored Ryan," I said. "I'm angry that you lied about it. I'm angry that you pretended we were all the same, that your love was balanced, when it was obvious to everyone, me, our cousins, even the neighbors, that it wasn't. You loved him loudly. You loved me quietly, when it was convenient. You protected him. You depended on me." Mom opened her mouth, but I kept going. "I'm 32 years old, and not once in my life have either of you asked me what I want. Not what I can do for the family, not how I can help Ryan, but what I want. And now I'm telling you, I want out. Not just of this house or this town, but of the role you wrote for me in this twisted little play." Ryan muttered something under his breath, something that sounded like selfish. And I looked him dead in the eyes. "You don't get to call me selfish when your whole identity depends on other people cleaning up your messes. I'm not selfish. I'm free." The room was a ruin of half-eaten food, unfinished drinks, and shattered illusions. And I hadn't even started telling them about the bank letters yet. It was almost absurd, standing there in the middle of what was supposed to be a celebration, staring at my family as if they were strangers I'd accidentally invited into my home. The lights above us buzzed faintly, a mechanical hum layered beneath the silence, the kind that grows heavy when there's nothing left to say, but everything's still hanging in the air. But I wasn't done. Not yet. There was still one more truth, one final stone I'd been carrying for far too long, buried deep in my pocket like a secret weapon I hadn't been sure I would use. But standing there, watching Ryan's face twisted in resentment, and my parents drowning in their own disbelief, I knew it was time to finally let it fall. I walked back toward the coffee table, slowly, deliberately, picked up the envelope again, and slipped it back into my purse. Then, without much ceremony, I reached into the side pocket and pulled out a second folder. This one was thinner, less elegant than the Columbia packet, held together by a bent metal clasp and streaked with faded ink from years of being stuffed in drawers and moved across apartments. I didn't bother opening it yet. I just held it up like a question nobody wanted to answer. "You remember that year after college?" I said, my voice still even, but firmer now, like a door closing behind me. "When I moved back home for a few months before I started my first real job? You all said it was temporary, just until I got back on my feet. I lived in the attic with the broken window and the wasps, and I paid rent while Ryan had the guest room and didn't pay a cent. Remember that?" No one replied. My mother looked like she wanted to pretend she hadn't heard me. My father stared down at the table like it might give him an escape route. Ryan rolled his eyes with the weary exaggeration of someone still clinging to the idea that he was the victim here. "Well," I continued, "while I was up there, applying to jobs and trying to rebuild the credit I didn't even know had been wrecked, I kept getting letters from a bank I didn't recognize. Collection notices, past due statements. At first I thought it was a mistake. Maybe someone else's name. But no, it was mine. All of it. Tens of thousands of dollars in debt. Defaulted loans. Interest climbing like a cancer. I thought I'd lost my mind. I knew I hadn't taken out a business loan. I was barely surviving on ramen and secondhand sweaters, so I requested the original documents. Took weeks to get the paperwork. And when it finally arrived, I opened the folder and pulled out a photocopy. It was blurry, black and white, a faxed image that had been folded so many times the ink had cracked along the lines. I walked over and laid it in front of my father. His face twitched, a small tick in his jaw, the only sign that he already knew what he was about to see. "That," I said, "is your signature, right next to mine. Only I didn't sign it. You did. You forged my name to take out a loan under my credit, to bail Ryan out of whatever ridiculous venture he'd failed at that month. I was 23. I hadn't even bought my first mattress." My mother gasped softly, one hand over her mouth like she was watching a horror movie, and didn't know the villain was seated beside her. My father didn't speak. He just sat there, hands clasped tightly, the page in front of him like a confession carved in stone. Ryan squinted at it, then laughed, dry, sharp, the kind of sound people make when their delusion begins to collapse, but they're not ready to admit it yet. "Oh, come on," he said. "Don't act like this is some big conspiracy. Dad was trying to help. You were living here for free, weren't you?" I turned on him so fast he actually flinched. "No, Ryan, I paid rent. I paid utilities. I covered groceries when Mom couldn't and helped fix the damn washing machine when it flooded the basement. You were the one who got a free ride. And I spent the next 5 years fixing a credit score I didn't ruin, paying off debt I didn't incur, and watching you brag about being a self-starter to every girl dumb enough to believe it." He tried to speak again, but I wasn't finished. Not nearly. "Do you know what it's like," I asked louder now, "to apply for an apartment and be told you need a co-signer because someone else destroyed your name? Do you know what it's like to wake up in a cold sweat thinking you're going to get sued for a business you didn't know existed? Do you know what it's like to realize the people who raised you, who claimed to love you, thought your future was less important than protecting the family's golden child?" My mother was crying openly now. Tears streaked her face like watercolors, soft and blurred, but I wasn't softened by it, not anymore. I'd learned finally that tears don't always mean remorse. Sometimes they're just another way to avoid accountability. "I didn't tell anyone," I said, quieter now, almost to myself. "I fixed it, alone. I took out my own personal loans to cover the debt, negotiated settlements, begged banks for grace periods. I did it because I thought I had to, because I didn't want to bring shame to this family, because I thought that if I just kept proving myself, eventually you'd see me, really see me. Not the backup singer to Ryan's solo act, but someone real, someone you could actually be proud of." My father finally spoke, his voice low and broken in a way I'd never heard before. I didn't know what else to do. Ryan needed help. We thought he had potential. You thought he mattered more, I interrupted, with a bitter calm that came from years of bearing that exact sentence. You gambled my future to pay for his failure, and I still showed up every damn Christmas and smiled like we were a normal family. There was no shouting after that, no hysterics, just a suffocating stillness, like the final seconds before a house fire swallows the last room. The image of that forged signature sat in front of them like a photograph from a crime scene. My mother kept looking between me and the paper as if hoping I might say I was mistaken, that it wasn't what it looked like. My father didn't move. Ryan reached for his drink again, then realized it was empty, and set the glass down with a dull thud. I'm leaving in August, I said finally. Not just for school, for good. There will be no visits, no calls, no Thanksgiving dinners filled with fake laughter and gritted teeth. I'm done being the supporting character in my own life. Ryan stood, his expressions somewhere between fury and fear. You're breaking the family, Hannah. No, I said, picking up the folder and sliding it back into my purse. I'm just done bleeding to keep it alive. And as I turned away, I could almost hear the splintering, the quiet but unmistakable sound of a legacy finally falling apart. The morning after the party, the air was unusually still, thick with that strange quiet that lingers after something irreversible has been said. The kind of silence that doesn't offer peace, but rather waits for you to acknowledge it, like an uninvited guest sitting in the corner of the room, watching your every move with quiet judgment. I woke up before sunrise, not because I couldn't sleep, although my rest had been shallow and dreamless, but because I wanted to leave while the house and its ghosts were still half asleep. There was nothing dramatic about my departure, no suitcase slammed shut, no teary goodbyes, no last-minute plea for forgiveness echoing down the hallway. There was only me, a half-packed car, and the sound of my own breathing as I stood in the doorway of a house I'd once believed held the possibility of something like love, or at the very least fairness, and now realized had only ever taught me how to survive with less than I deserved. I left a note on the refrigerator, not because I owed them anything, but because I wanted to make it clear that I wasn't simply storming out in a fit of rage or looking to create drama I'd later regret. The note was short and to the point. Don't look for me. I'm going to live my life now, and I hope one day, if you ever truly see me, it won't be too late. I didn't sign it with love. I didn't sign it at all. As I pulled out of the driveway, I looked once, just once, at the house that had witnessed every version of me, small and eager, bruised and invisible, angry and finally awake, and I felt no sadness, no fear, only the strange lightness of someone who had finally stopped carrying weight that was never hers to hold in the first place. I didn't cry. I didn't even flinch. I simply drove away from it all, mile by mile, leaving behind not just the physical place, but the entire architecture of a life built around other people's expectations. The drive out of town felt surreal, as if I were watching someone else's story unfold from the passenger seat. I didn't put on music. I didn't call anyone. I just let the road hum beneath me like a lullaby for the parts of me that had never had the chance to rest. I thought about what it would be like to arrive in New York, to walk into a room full of strangers at Columbia, none of whom knew anything about my family, none of whom would see me as a sidekick to a man-child brother or the reliable daughter who quietly held everything together while someone else always got the spotlight. I thought about what it might feel like to have nothing expected of me but everything possible. And for the first time in years, maybe decades, I felt the tiniest bloom of something that might have been hope. Weeks passed quickly after that. Orientation came and went. I moved into a modest but sunlit apartment in the city, got lost in the subways, discovered a bakery that made bread so good it nearly made me weep, and started classes that challenged me in ways I hadn't felt since my early 20s. I made friends, real ones. Not the kind who knew me through Ryan or came to family events out of obligation, but people who saw me for who I was and were interested in who I was becoming. I wasn't anyone's shadow here. I wasn't a placeholder or an afterthought. I was just Hannah. And that, for once, felt like enough. It wasn't until nearly 4 months after the party that the letter arrived. There was no return address, no postmark I could trace. Just a plain white envelope slipped under my door sometime during the day, wedged between a stack of junk mail and a free trial gym flyer. I stared at it for a long time before opening it, not because I was afraid, but because I wanted to give myself one last moment of peace before I let whatever was inside rearrange the air around me again. The handwriting was familiar in a way that made my chest tighten immediately, the kind of handwriting that once filled birthday cards and grocery lists, long before I learned what it really meant to be part of this family. The message inside was only one line. Were we really that bad, or were you always planning to leave? There was no signature, no apology, no explanation, just that one question, written in ink that looked as unsure as the words themselves. I read it over and over, as if the meaning might change with repetition, but it never did. It just stayed there, suspended in ambiguity, daring me to answer. I didn't. I folded the paper neatly, slid it back into the envelope, and tucked it into the drawer beside my bed. I didn't know what scared me more, the possibility that they truly didn't understand what they had done, or the possibility that they did, and simply couldn't live with it. Either way, I wasn't going back. I couldn't, because once you see the truth of a thing, how fragile the love was, how conditional the support, how deep the wounds, you can't unsee it. And you shouldn't have to pretend you never saw it just to make everyone else comfortable. Sometimes I think about what would happen if they showed up one day. If Ryan came to my apartment with some clumsy version of an apology, or if Mom called crying and said she finally saw it, all of it, and begged me to come home. I don't think I'd slam the door. I don't even think I'd yell. I think I'd listen, maybe even let them speak. But I don't know that I'd ever let them back in. Not because I enjoy holding a grudge, but because I've learned the difference between forgiveness and permission. And I can forgive without forgetting. I can move on without opening the door wide enough for the past to crawl back in. There's a part of me, a small and stubborn part, that still hopes they sit down one day and say it out loud. That they were wrong, that I deserved better, that I mattered more than I was ever made to believe. But hope, I've learned, is a dangerous thing when it's built on the backs of people who've already shown you how little they're willing to carry. So I don't wait for it. I don't pray for it. I just live. And maybe that's the most honest revenge of all. Not slamming doors or burning bridges, but building something so complete, so undeniable, that the silence left behind says everything you no longer need to.